On February 14, 1980, Yellowstone National Park recorded an incident that would never appear in its public logs. At approximately 11:47 p.m., Park Ranger Adam McKinley, newly assigned to the Northwestern Ranger Station, radioed in what dispatch described as distressed and incoherent communication. When a search team arrived 3 hours later, the ranger station was found abandoned. The door was torn from its hinges, lanterns extinguished, and the interior in disarray. McKinley was discovered at dawn, 15 miles from the site, injured and disoriented, wandering near Highway 191. He later claimed to have been chased through the forest by an unidentified woman wearing a torn bridal gown. His account was dismissed as trauma-induced hallucination caused by exposure and shock. Within a week, McKinley resigned from the service and relocated with his wife to Kansas. The station was quietly decommissioned 2 months later. Official reports cite structural safety concerns due to unstable ground conditions. Internal memos, however, reference a series of unexplained power failures, untraceable radio interference, and multiple staff requests for transfer, all logged in the weeks following McKinley's disappearance. In the decades since, the building has been reclaimed by the forest. Local hikers still refer to it as the Bride Station. Those who have ventured near it after dark report the faint sound of silver anklets echoing through the trees. This is the story of Adam McKinley. I'm a retired US Army officer, now living in Kansas with my family. When people ask me why I sold my family house in Montana and moved all the way to Kansas, I often tell them, "Oh, life just happened, I guess." But the truth is, I'd be lying to them, and also to myself. The real reason I sold my family house and left Montana goes much deeper than that. It was about 45 years ago when I was newly married, probably around 25 years old. Right after high school, I had started working as a park ranger at one of the state parks in Montana. Back then, the pay was terrible. We're talking $2 or maybe $3 an hour, which would be closer to $5 in today's money. It wasn't about the money though. I loved being outdoors, and honestly, the job was easy. I mostly just walked around, made sure people didn't wander into the no-entry zones, and asked tourists not to destroy the plants and flowers. Also, the park wasn't that big, and there were hardly any visitors. It was only during weekends that it got a little busy, but I didn't mind that. I actually had the weekends off, so it worked out well. But as life goes, things change. When I got married, I suddenly had a lot more responsibilities. That little bit of money just wasn't cutting it anymore. I realized I needed something better, something that could provide more for us. Not long after my wife and I tied the knot, a friend of mine told me that Yellowstone National Park was hiring new rangers. They were offering $8 an hour, plus food and housing. At the time, that sounded like a fortune compared to what I was making. Without hesitation, I applied, and before I knew it, I had the job. For context, Yellowstone stretches across both Wyoming and Montana, though most of it lies in Wyoming. Since my family lived just north of the park in Montana, it meant I could come home on weekends. Everything about it seemed perfect. But there was one thing I didn't know when I accepted the job. The higher pay came with a catch. I was the only ranger at night. During the day, there were a few staff members around, day rangers, park manager, maintenance workers, and guides. My first day went by without much trouble. I met the team, went through some quick training, and got familiar with the area. Everyone was polite, but there was this strange tension I couldn't quite figure out. Later that afternoon, right before their shifts ended, 2 of the rangers came up to me. They asked if it was true that I'd be staying at the station overnight. I told them yes, and they just kind of looked at each other. There was this pause, like they were trying to figure out how to say what they wanted without scaring me too much. Finally, one of them asked quietly, "Did they tell you why no one else wants that shift?" I told him no, and he just shook his head, almost like he was disappointed that I hadn't been warned. "You'll find out," he said, and then they both left without another word. At the time, I really thought they were joking or just pulling my leg. After all, I was the new guy, but I wasn't the type to get scared easily. Before taking this job at Yellowstone, I had spent countless nights alone in the woods. I was used to the dark, to the sounds of the forest, and to the loneliness. I thought I was ready for anything, but I'll be honest, my first night at Yellowstone changed all of that. That night made me realize there was something about that place that no one wanted to talk about. After the two rangers left, I walked to my room. I started fixing the bed, laying out my things, and preparing dinner for myself. I was hungry, but the cold and damp air around the station made me crave something warm. Luckily, I found a packet of instant soup tucked in one of the drawers. I filled a pot with water and set it on the stove to heat, and meanwhile, I finished arranging my bed. The station was quiet, the kind of quiet that almost feels alive, and the only sound was the gentle boiling of water in the pot. Then I heard it, a subtle but distinct sound of leaves being crushed outside, like someone or something was walking just beyond the walls of the station. My stomach sank a little, and I froze, trying to convince myself it was just an animal. But I had learned over the years not to ignore that gut feeling. I slowly stood up and walked toward the door. I swiftly turned on my flashlight, shining it carefully across the area outside. There was a dim light above the entrance door, weak and almost flickering, but it wasn't enough to illuminate the forest beyond. I waited, pointing my flashlight toward the shadows. My heart was starting to beat a little faster. For what felt like 2 minutes, nothing moved. Nothing at all. Then, abruptly, the light above the entrance door went out. At that exact same moment, the light inside my room flickered and died too, plunging the station into complete darkness. I became alert, but I also knew it was normal for lights to go out in these worn-down stations. I stood there briefly for a moment, listening and trying to figure out if I actually heard something, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. Then, as quietly as I could, I stepped back inside and locked the door firmly. "It's nothing, just the wind or some wild animal. Nothing harmful," I muttered to myself, then lit a few candles around. After that, I turned my focus back to the pot of water boiling on the stove. At that moment, the only light in the room came from the candle flames and the blue glow from the gas stove. I poured in the soup packet and watched the bubbles rise and pop. The sound was almost soothing, and I had forgotten about the sounds I had heard a few minutes ago. Then slowly, my thoughts drifted to my wife. We didn't have phones back then. If we did, I probably would have called her right then, just to hear her voice. That's when I heard it. A soft giggle, then the sound of tiny bells or anklets jingling as someone ran circles around the house. My body went cold, and I could feel a chill traveling from my neck all the way down to my feet. I was certain of that sound. There was no imagining it. The sound was real. I was sure there was someone or something out there. I turned off the stove, blew out the candles, and stood completely still in the dark. I covered my mouth, hoping I didn't make a sound while breathing. Deep down, I prayed not to hear that sound again. But my ears, they were perked up, almost anticipating her sound. Then it came again. The same jingling sound, which was much closer this time, followed by a sudden, violent bang on the door. I dropped down on the floor with hands still firmly covering my mouth. My room wasn't very big. It was a small, narrow rectangle. The bed was pressed right against the wall next to the door, and the stove sat in a far corner. And from where I crouched, I could see the big, black door right in front of me. Thump, thump, thump. The sound came 3 times. Then there was silence. However, before I could take a deep breath of relief, the door in front of me flung wide open. I can't even explain the feeling that hit me. It was pure paralysis. Standing there in front of me was a woman. She stepped inside slowly, the silver-colored anklets around her feet jingling with every step she took. At first, I couldn't see her face because I thought her head was tilted forward. Then I realized she didn't have a head. She seemed to giggle loudly, perhaps relishing in my fear. Tears dripped down my face in horror as she moved closer to me, almost hopping. Her anklets chimed faster and louder, ching, ching, ching. That was when I saw her clearly. She looked like a bride in a ragged gown, her head freshly severed, dried blood still clinging to the old, dirty white fabric. "Why did you lock me outside?" she whispered softly, then began to laugh hysterically. I don't know how, but I managed to run. My legs felt like they were on fire, my lungs were burning, and my heart was hammering so hard I thought it would explode. I ran for what felt like 15 or 20 minutes, only stopping when I finally couldn't hear the chimes of her anklets anymore. I leaned against a tree, gasping for breath, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my pocket torch. As a ranger, I always carried one. I fumbled it out, took several deep breaths, and turned it on to see where I was and which direction I could go. The second the light hit the ground in front of me, my blood ran cold. My stomach sank. I was standing in a graveyard, and not just any graveyard. Right in front of me was a tombstone with my wife's name on it. Today's date was carved below, and underneath were the words, "Bride of Adam McKinley." I couldn't move or think, my flashlight trembling in my hand. And then I heard it again. The jingling of her silver anklets. Closer this time. She had come back. I ran again, faster than before. Branches tore at my arms, roots tripped me, my legs barely moving. But I couldn't stop. It felt like no matter which way I ran, I was going deeper into the forest instead of out. And then, finally, I saw a faint light ahead. The highway. Relief hit me for a second before a huge truck came barreling toward me, its yellow headlights blinding me. Before I could even react, it hit me. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. I didn't have major injuries, just cuts and bruises. They released me that same night. The police said I kept giving them my home address, begging to go back, begging to see my wife. I don't remember any of it. My wife later told me that I got home around 3 a.m, shaking, pale, constantly pleading with her not to leave me. I have no memory of it, but she swears it happened. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the anklets jingling, coming closer and closer. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, seeing her in my dreams, the same headless woman in her tattered gown hopping toward me. I left that job immediately and even put my house up for sale. But the sound of the anklets and the dreams didn't stop. Finally, when the house was sold and we left Montana for good, it all stopped. We continued our lives together. I got another job, and I slowly started forgetting about what happened. It was almost as if it was just a movie I had seen many, many years ago. until yesterday. My wife was asleep in the bedroom upstairs, and I was down in the living room watching soccer and enjoying a glass of single malt whiskey. Then suddenly the TV just died, and just as I was about to reach for the remote, I heard a slow thump, thump, thump. Footsteps on the porch, then the sound of jingling. It all came flooding back to me. I felt an overwhelming panic and I froze. All of a sudden I woke up on the couch early in the morning. Thinking it was all just a dream, I kind of laughed a bit to myself. I must have had a bit too much whiskey and passed out. But then, right there in front of me on the coffee table was a small piece of paper with something written on it. Why did you lock me outside?